the president of the Jerusalem Center for Public Affairs. It seems like the main deal between the US and Saudi Arabia is being completely overshadowed here by Israeli and Saudi interests.
I wouldn't say overshadowed. I would say converging. If we take a look at where Prime Minister Netanyahu began his U.S. trip, it was with Elon Musk, the most important technological entrepreneur and the wealthiest man in the world. That was a signal to Mohammed bin Salman of Israel's prowess in the world of AI and high technology. This is exactly what Saudi Arabia is interested in. This is exactly in line with Mohammed bin Salman's vision of Saudi 2030, and it was that vision that Prime Minister Netanyahu skillfully delivered, in my assessment, by starting his trip in Tesla and not in the halls of the UN.
Absolutely. And what about this defense pact? This would or could look like, is it going to be similar to NATO, if that kind of a model? And if Israel is part of a sideline agreement, why not include them in this as well?
Well, this is a real sticking point for Saudi Arabia. I know that the obstacle to a deal is far more on the table between Saudi Arabia and the United States as opposed to the Palestinian issue, where, in my assessment, U.S. Jewish leaders get it wrong, is that Saudi Arabia is far less interested in a full-blown Palestinian state along the indefensible, fragile lines of the post-1967 lines. But in fact, Saudi Arabia needs to show sympathy and support for the Palestinian public, even though they know that the source of the problem is the Palestinian Authority leadership. They're not the solution, they are the problem. And it's very clear that Saudi Arabia knows that. And what Saudi Arabia needs is from the United States. They need that NATO-like defense pact, which is very difficult for this administration to deliver. And they also want clearly a civilian nuclear capability, which is a negotiating point for also for Israel, because it really raises concerns to make sure that a civilian nuclear program does not transform into a military nuclear program. That is become a point where Israel and the Saudis have to negotiate, not only Israel and the United States, even though Jerusalem and Washington are negotiating as partners as to what the terms of that civilian nuclear deal would be.
Now, liberal Jews are evidently making their voices clear in this open letter, but critics are saying that any possible agreement between Israel and Saudi Arabia does not impact them, but rather the people on the ground. Do you tend to agree here, or is this necessarily the same as how a lot of people tend to put both anti-Zionism and anti-Semitism in the same bracket, that it's one and the same and should not be a distinction between the two?
Well, there's clearly anti-Semitism is reflected today as collective anti-Semitism, as expressed through when people say anti-Zionist, even though the people who say I'm anti-Zionist but not anti-Semitic are misled and ill-advised. It's one of the major misunderstandings in the Western discourse today, and this is clearly something that I think Israel is going to have to lead the race in really bushwhacking a new understanding that people say that they're against or oppose the existence of the Jewish state, or they oppose the Jewish state in this or that borders. They're really being, in many cases, anti-Semitic in a collective sense of the word.
Do you see the Saudi-Israel situation being at least on the very forefront of this upcoming meeting that we are waiting for in terms of the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and the US President Joe Biden? Or are there supposed to be other security issues? We know that the US is one of the biggest defense suppliers of Israel. Is there supposed to be something more that is going to overtake a possible normalization agreement that also includes some kind of security and defense agreements?
Very good question. There are two urgent issues that define Prime Minister Netanyahu's his trip and his mission as Prime Minister for the sixth time, unprecedented in the history of Western politics. And that is, one is the Iranian regime's race for regional supremacy under a nuclear umbrella, and the second is normalization with Saudi Arabia. Clearly, America, the best friend of the state of Israel and the people of Israel. The security defense pacts, which were signed under the Obama administration, a $30 billion commitment from the United States But clearly, that commitment reflects Israel's power as an R&D center for American weaponry. So America's getting a lot from that. But clearly, it's the twin issue of the strategic and even existential Iranian regime threat to destroy the state of Israel, which they have claimed. It's the only case in the history of the United Nations since 1946 where a UN member state, the Islamic Republic of Iran, has vowed publicly and repeatedly to massacre the Jews in Israel and destroy the state of Israel. That is clearly an unacceptable and intolerable reality that is leading Prime Minister Netanyahu's trip, as it has in the years past, and that he will discuss with his American counterparts, as well as pushing for what looks increasingly to be a possible deal with Saudi Arabia. Having said that, I am doubtful that Mohammed bin Salman, having suffered a lot of I would call it, from his point of view, degradation from this American administration, would give a gift of normalization to President Biden. But having said that, in politics, everything's important. All three parties need the deal. So it really remains to be seen whether it will be signed, sealed, and delivered before the 2024 U.S. elections.